The Oklahoma Sooners are kind of highly looked upon in the JP poll. Josh Pate puts out his power ratings, not rankings, ratings. We'll discuss those coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Y'all know me, I love sports, love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as playoffs are winding down, we're going into the Olympics, we're getting fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel is letting me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up the bets anytime I'm in the mood. Best part about that is right now, baseball, you've got a pretty big matchup with the Dodgers and Padres. Shohei Ohtani is doing what he does best. So you could jump on a prop bet. You could jump on the game, which is minus 42 going in on for Tuesday night. Or if you're feeling really froggy, you can start looking at Oklahoma games, right? You start looking at the Temple game where Oklahoma walks in at a 42.5-point favorite against Temple Owls to open the season. Whatever it is, whatever you dream up, you can do. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. So there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/locked on and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day on your TV? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app or on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the JP poll, it's the most controversial poll in college football. I think because he's got his own numerical analytical rating system that he's come up with that defines who the top teams are in college football week to week. And the Oklahoma Sooners sit pretty solidly right there at number 12 in the JP poll, which is pretty solid. I think that's probably about where they're going to land in the AP when it comes out in the USA Today coaches poll. But what's surprising here is they're the 5th highest ranked SEC team behind Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, and LSU. I mean, they're sitting in front of Aggie, Vols, Mizzou. So JP Poll's power rating system really likes the Oklahoma Sooners going into 2024.
Yeah, my favorite thing about his ratings, not rankings, is that a lot of people don't truly understand how it works, right? His whole point and purpose of this is that if the spreads were dropped today, based upon the information we have right now, that Oklahoma will be favored at there'll be only 11 teams that will be favored against Oklahoma in a neutral site game. So as of right now, like I said, in the SEC, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia would all be favorites. Not sure how big of a favorite, but they would be favored going into said game because that's just kind of how ratings work. And then if you go non-con, you've got Michigan, Florida State, Notre Dame, Penn State, right? Oregon and Ohio State that would all be considered favorites in a game going into that. And that's just going off information today. We still got to see what the teams look like fall camp. Still got to see what they look like going into the first game of the season and how they actually perform. So it makes sense to put Oklahoma there. I think what intrigued me the most is that we're ahead of Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Missouri, right? Because everybody was super high on Missouri because of how favorable their schedule is. But going into a game, it sounds like what JP's saying is if there's a neutral site game set for that game, there's no way Missouri's going to be favored over Oklahoma. And there's a good chance they'd be probably a couple, they could be a good field goal to a touchdown dogs in that game. That's going to make a lot of other teams mad hearing that, right? It's like, how are they going to be favored against us? And it's typically because I know he takes in consideration also that blue chip ratio, which we talked about before. That's critical. How much talent do you have? And then on top of the talent, how much are you going to execute on? That's where A&M drops, is because you got to execute on it. You can't have all that talent and not execute. Texas finally executed one time. So we've got to see if they can do it again with their ratio. But as of right now, It makes sense. I like Oklahoma in that 10 to 15 range on every single ratings and rankings because it gives Oklahoma an opportunity to prove themselves without getting too much of a quote unquote bias. I'm here for it.
Yeah, it seems like you look at a Tennessee game. If they were favored on a neutral field, according to Josh Pate, we're looking at probably Oklahoma's going to be favored in that game when Tennessee comes to town.
Hmm.
You think about Oklahoma going on the road to face Missouri. I mean, there's a good chance that Oklahoma could be a favorite in that game, depending on how the two seasons are going on. But even if Oklahoma maybe has more losses on their schedule by the time they get to Columbia, there's still a decent chance that Oklahoma could be a favorite because Missouri's schedule is very favorable. I said it a few weeks ago out on Twitter. I said if Missouri doesn't win 10 games, it is a deplorable season for them because their schedule is so good. The non-conference is great. The conference schedule is phenomenal. They probably got the best conference schedule of anybody in the SEC. So this is going to be a very, very fascinating year. Any other surprises on there? You don't see any Big 12 teams until you get to number 16 with Kansas State.
Yeah, they kind of lead up. They got 16, 17, and you go down to what, 23 and 25. Iowa State being up there in the top 25 of his ratings is very interesting. And I say that because Iowa State's one of the top teams in the country in returning production. And I think that's a recipe for success for Matt Campbell. That's something that he has always thrived in. The seasons where he brings back a bunch of his talent from the year before or production, he's very much successful. It's those seasons where he's depleted because he's got so much production coming back and they all leave at one time. That's when you kind of see them fall down. But they always find a way to bounce back unless they decide to start gambling, which is really what ruins every year. But Florida at 21, that has ruffled a lot of feathers inside of the comments or the mentions and comments inside of that tweet because people are like, oh, Florida, there's no way Florida's going to be. No, Florida and Miami both have the rosters to be favored in a lot of games this year. They just play, like, Florida plays a very hard schedule, but against other conferences, yes, they're going to be favored in majority of those games. That's the thing that you have to look at when it comes to this. Georgia's the only one on here that makes sense, really, honestly, in the top five at being number one. I don't think Texas should be that high. I think Texas should probably be around six, right? But I don't know who you move around up. That's kind of where I'm struggling with because figuring out which teams would be favored on neutral sites. I don't even think I'd see Penn State being favored over Oklahoma in a neutral site game mid-season. Preseason, I get it. Mid-season, whew, this is going to change a lot over the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, and I have a good sinking suspicion that Oklahoma is going to rise in this ranking or rating, I should say, over the next couple of months as we get into the heart of the season.